Shankaracharya, the great philosopher, who has written the celebrated commentaries on the triple foundations of Vedanta, that is Gita, Upanishads and Brahma Sutra. He says that anyone who enters spiritual life, meditative life, must try to acquire 4 important qualifications, which he calls sadhana chadushtayam. Sadhana here means tools, instruments necessary for spiritual practice. If we use meditation just as a relaxation technique, perhaps this may not be required. But if you use meditation to evolve a total philosophy of life that helps us in our day-to-day activities, then we will have to try to acquire some of these characteristics. In Sanskrit, they are called sadhana chadushtayam. He has outlined these 4 qualifications in his celebrated work. The name of the book is Vivekananda. In English we may call it the crest jewel of wisdom. It is one of the foundational texts in Vedanta, and in a way it is a primer on Vedanta philosophy and Vedantic way of life. The first qualification that he refers to is a proper understanding of what is real, what is the eternal value, what is the fundamental value that should guide our life. Now, to decide as to what is the fundamental value, the eternal value, that should become a part of the guiding philosophy of our life, we must have a discerning mind. She calls it Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. In Sanskrit we can say discerning of the real and unreal, or the eternal and non-eternal. By eternal he means something that we consider to be the goal of our life. You know, all of us have got some priority in life. If we are not able to meditate properly, if we are not able to lead a spiritual life, one possible reason is that we are not very much interested in meditative life. We have an interest, but we don't consider spiritual life or meditative life as the supreme value in our life. There are so many other values. Along with that, we include meditation or spiritual life also. That means there are so many values, so many goals, so many ideals that compete for priority in our mental life. Now, Shankara says in practical life, we need not neglect the realities of common sense experience. But then, those who really want to go deep, seriously, deep into meditative life, should have a proper understanding as to what is eternal, what is the supreme value, which is everlasting, something for which we must dedicate all our life, something to which we must give top priority, and the other values, other goals, ideals in life which are somewhat relative in importance. Now, once we intensify our interest and desire to lead a spiritual life, to lead a meditative life, even that intensity, the strong desire itself will help us to focus more and more on the object of meditation, on studying Vedantic philosophy and so on. Because if you don't have a strong interest, a strong desire, there will be many conflicts. I can give many examples. Children who may not be interested in devoting too much of energy and time to studies may be spending a lot of time watching the TV, watching the sports. See, the students who are interested in sports will have a tremendous power of concentration when they watch a game or sports in which they are interested. So the interest, or rather intensity of desire or intensity of the interest, helps them to concentrate, to focus their mind completely on the object of their interests. This is very natural. Now, are we interested in meditative practices just as a fan of football is interested in watching a football game? He'll forget everything, especially those who are very much interested, attached to the particular sport in which he has a lot of interests. He will forget everything. So, Shankara says that we must have a strong sense of discernment. The word that could be used in discrimination, but it is used in the sense of discerning mind. In that sense, means what is really the subject of top priority in my life, and what are other items which which we need, but which don't deserve top priority, which is called nitya anitya vastu viveka. Nitya here means eternal, everlasting. As I said last time, we know very well that whatever we try to acquire in this empirical world, in this relative world, it will be money, status, reputation, promotion, professional life, whatever may be, they certainly give us some satisfaction. But we know very well that they are not everlasting. They don't last forever. They may be necessary. We may have to work for them as part of life in this world. But we know very well that they are certainly not everlasting. In fact, that's why people are taking more and more interest in Vedanta. If people are turning towards mysticism and Vedanta, it's because they have realized that whatever they can acquire in secular life, in empirical life, may be necessary for them to lead a happy life in this world, but they don't bring everlasting, eternal happiness. Then what is that which brings everlasting happiness? And according to Vedanta, it is the realization that we are not this body, that we are not this psychophysical mechanism, we are something beyond and above all that. We are the supreme consciousness, supreme knowledge, and supreme bliss, which in the language of Vedanta is called Brahman or Atman. Atman as the immanent reality, and the same immanent reality is omnipresent reality also. So as it in its omnipresent dimension, it is called Brahman. Now, therefore, the first requirement for anyone who wants to enter meditative life is that he should have a strong sense of discernment. He should be able to decide for himself what is that which is everlasting, which brings eternal peace, everlasting peace and happiness. Other things he need not neglect, but he should know that all other relative objects are only necessary tools and instruments for spiritual life. They do not constitute any eternal value. In one of the well-known Upanishads, a very small Upanishad, it's called Ishavasya Upanishad. At the beginning itself, there are two verses which together give a complete philosophy of life. In a way, it is an expansion of this first requirement mentioned in the famous work Vivekananda. The first verse says that the entire creation is pervaded by one Supreme Spirit. There is nothing in this world in which the Supreme Spirit, the Divine Principle, is not present. Now, does it mean that we must run away from this realities of practical life? So, if everything in this world is pervaded by the omnipresent, the immanent principle, then live in this world, enjoy this world, not through the medium of enjoyment, but through the medium of renunciation. A kind of that's the first verse. The idea is this: is everything is pervaded by the supreme divine principle, which we call Atman or supreme consciousness. Then we can live in this world, but at the same time we need not look upon this world as something to be enjoyed. We need not look upon this world as an orange that we can squeeze and drink the last ounce of its juice. Live in this world and face all the problems, lead a happy life, but be detached. It's not a negative attitude. Don't be too attached to the physical comforts that the world presents before you. Now, if we can combine these two ideas, on the one hand, the idea that world is pervaded by one supreme principle. Everything in this world is pervaded by one supreme principle. This Atman, supreme consciousness. At the same time, you live in this world, but don't look upon this world as something to be enjoyed, not as an object of enjoyment, but as something which we can live with, but should not be enslaved by worldly pleasures. We can live in this world without being worldly minded. There is no need to run away from the world, but we have to change our attitude and outlook towards the world. This is the meaning of the first verse. Now, once we realize what is the supreme truth, once we realize that the entire creation is pervaded by the omnipresent, the all-pervading, the immanent, transcendental principle, then this world becomes it's become something that we can really enjoy without being enslaved by sensory pleasures. That's the first verse. So Shankara says, this is the first requirement for anyone who wants to enter spiritual life. Seriously to enter spiritual life. Otherwise we can use meditation, we can use spirituality as a relaxation technique. The problem is, if this meditation used as a relaxation technique is not supported by a solid philosophy of life, it won't bring eternal contentment. So, nowadays we read in different journals and books that breathing exercises, Hatha Yoga, all these are very helpful. They are certainly very helpful. See, you are able to bring down tension level, stress level. We are able to enjoy some peace of mind if we regularly practice breath control and relaxation as a relaxation technique. I mean, meditation as a relaxation technique. No doubt. But then when there is a dilemma, when a crisis comes, see, some days back there was a discussion, what happens when one of your near and dear one dies? This relaxation technique, breath control, may help you when you return from your office, you are tired and exhausted. If you do some pranayama, it can certainly bring down the stress level. tension level, no doubt about it. But suppose something happens when a near and dear one dies, or maybe something like a serious domestic problem becomes a insurmountable crisis. We had to confront this problem. We can confront this problem only if we have a solid philosophy of life. So, once we realize that this Atman or this Brahman, the Supreme Consciousness, is the only eternal reality, then we think, what are we, what are these human bodies, etc. According to Vedantic tradition, as I said on many occasions, because this we have to repeat again and again, this is closely related to practical spiritual life. According to Vedantic tradition, life is not just a straight line progression. It moves in a cycle. We are born, and then we engage ourselves in different activities, and according to the type of activities, we are reborn after passing away. So we are born, we work, we die, and we are reborn. So this cycle continues, as I said on many occasions. This cycle continues unless one actually experiences the unity between the individual soul and the Supreme Soul, which with Vedantic terminology we call Jiva Brahma Aikyam. Well, in simple English we can say, the moment we realize that we are not these bodies, psychophysical mechanisms which come and go, we are something beyond all this, something which is deathless, which is never born, because there was never a time it did not exist, and there will never be a time when it will not exist. So it is deathless, and it is also birthless. It is called Ajam, it is birthless, it is never born. Therefore it is Avinashi, it is beyond death, beyond destruction. The moment we realize this, we come out of the cycle. But till we realize this, we have to move through this cycle of birth, existence, death, and rebirths. Now, as I said earlier, how to face a serious problem in life with a solid philosophy of Vedanta. I can give one illustration based on a story which is found in one of our devotional classics, which is also a great book on Advaita Vedanta. Srimad Bhagavata Puranam it is called. There is a story of a king. The king had a son, and he became a promising youth, and the king was getting old. So he was thinking of relinquishing his kingdom, handing over the responsibility to his son, who was a very promising prince. But suddenly, due to some unexpected illness, unknown illness, this prince dies. And both the king and queen, they were weeping and crying. People also in the city, in the palace, they were also very much upset. Because in ancient times, if the king dies without an issue, without a son, there will be anarchy, a lot of fighting. Some neighboring armies, rulers will invade the kingdoms. Problems will be there. So the king was very much upset, the queen also. They were crying and weeping. And now at that time, a great sage happened to visit the palace. His name was Narada. Now, when he came, the king and the queen honored him. He was a great wise man of ancient times. And he tried to console his parents. See, why are you weeping and crying? Everyone will have to face death. He has died. because of some unknown reasons he died prematurely. There are so many people, young men, who die every day. You go to your own, go visit and different places in your own kingdom. So the sages tried to console the parents, but they could not be consoled. They were crying, they kept crying and weeping. Then the sage told them, I shall teach you the supreme truth. In fact, the whole Vedantic philosophy he expounded to console them, but they could not be consoled. Then I shall teach you, I shall show you. He brought back the youth. This youth he brought back to life. So the youth got up, the prince got up, as if he was in his slumber. Then the sage told him, see, your parents are crying and weeping. The ministers are very much upset. Why don't you console your parents? They are so much upset. Then the prince asked, which parents? Which pair of parents? Because he had gone through so many births and deaths. So he could not recognize these the latest parents. So in Vedantic tradition, life and death, these are all temporary phenomena. If life is itself is a transitory phenomenon, transitory experience, then we know everything that we experience in this world is all relative. They are not everlasting. This conviction, a strong conviction of this truth, is the first qualification for anyone who wants to enter spiritual life. Because that will equip him with a strong sense of non-attachment towards all transitory worldly pleasures. It doesn't mean that he will give up and he will go to forest, no. But he will not be too much enslaved, he will not be too much obsessed, too much attached to worldly pleasures. Rather, he will not be enslaved by worldly passions and worldly pleasures. So, according to the great philosopher Shankaracharya, the second qualification is the result of the first qualification. The second qualification in Sanskrit is called Iha Amutra Phala Bhoga Viragaha. In English we can say a complete non-attachment, rather detachment towards worldly pleasures in this world, and an equally strong revulsion towards heavenly pleasures. One should not be an aspirant of heavenly pleasures also, because according to Vedantic tradition, heaven also is a transitory entity. Heaven is nothing but an extension of worldly pleasures. In fact, we conceive of a place where we can fulfill whatever unfulfilled dreams and expectations and desires we have. So we conceive of a place. That place is called heaven. We call the place heaven. So one should never have any desire either for worldly enjoyments in this life or heavenly pleasures after death. This is the second qualification. Now, the third qualification that Shankaracharya says is Samadhi Shakka Sambandhi. Well, the third qualification, we can say 6 characteristics are outlined in this book, which all spiritual aspirants who want to seriously enter meditative life should try to acquire. The first qualification is mind control. Means one should try to keep one's mind away from external pleasures and external objects of enjoyment. In this context, the same author, the same great philosopher, in the same text refers to the stranglehold of senses over human mind. A famous verse is the Shabdadavi Panjabhireva Pancha Panjattamapusa Gunena Baddhaha Guranga Madanga Padanga Minaha Brunga Nara Panjabhiranchidakim. I shall explain in English. Here, the great philosopher, he is giving an analysis of, a detailed description of how human mind is being dragged towards external objects of enjoyment every minute, every moment of his existence. That is the subject here. So he gives the example of 5 creatures, not human beings. Each of these creatures is dragged towards certain objects of enjoyment, and this attraction becomes the cause of its death. That is the story. So first, Kuranga means say deer. According to ancient tradition, some mythological belief, maybe in the early days, hunters used to play on some musical instruments to drag out deers hiding in bushes and caves and forests. So they will play on a flute or some other musical instruments. So listening to this music, the deer will come out of its hiding place. And when it comes out, the hunter will shoot the arrow and kill it. So one sense of perception, the ear, becomes the cause of its death. That's what happens to deer. An elephant, next creature, animal mentioned is elephant. Madangam is elephant. Now, elephant, how do they catch elephants? Elephants normally move in herds. Female elephants and male elephants touching each other. So, the sense of touch becomes the cause of its death. What really happens is, as they move in groups, these elephants, they fall in pits dug by hunters. They will dig deep pits and put some leaves, and on the top they will spread some eatable, some leaves and other items which normally elephants eat, and they come to eat and they are caught. That's how elephants die. So just one sense of perception, the sense of touch, becomes the cause of its death, destruction. And then the third creature that is mentioned is moth. The story is very, very descriptive. Moths generally they are attracted by the blazing color, the red color of blazing fire. And when they see the blazing fire, they think that it is something attractive. They move towards it, and they are caught and they are burned. So the sense of vision becomes the cause of its death. And then the fourth creature that's mentioned is fish. The sense of touch becomes the cause of its death, because when fish eat something, a bait, they are caught and they are killed. And then there are some other insects and creatures which move from flower plant to flower plant. They are attracted by the perfume, by the smell, the sense of smell. And they are killed when they come out moving from flower to flower. So what really happens, in the case of each of these creatures, just one sense of perception becomes the cause of their death. And then the philosopher asked the question, Nara Panchabhiranchidakim. The question is this: what to speak of man, the fate of a man? Because man or woman, any human being for the matter, a human being is dragged, his mind is, or her mind is dragged towards these objects of pleasure simultaneously, all the time. All the 5 senses are dragging the mind of a human being towards external pleasures. So, how to control the mind? But here one suggestion is made. This mind should be should be fed with positive ideas, useful ideas which are conducive to spiritual life, which help us in meditative life. And that takes us to the second part of the third qualification. The third qualification, according to the text, is mind control, sense control, etc. That is the literal translation of the third qualification. Shamadhi Sarka Sampatti. 6 characteristics are mentioned here. Mind control, sense control, etc. That is the literal translation. So the first one is mind control. Mind should be, we cannot control the mind. What we can do is try to bring good food to the mind. Bad food means bad thoughts, bad ideas which take us away from meditative life. Ideas which can create conflicts and can cause negative images and negative impressions and tendencies which come to the surface when we try to meditate, when we try to enter spiritual life. Because spiritual life is like swimming against the current. Swimming against the current involves a lot of effort. It requires a lot of effort. So whenever we try to meditate, whenever we try to really enter spiritual life, we find a number of obstacles, conflicts, and unexpected unknown problems come to the surface. It doesn't mean that spiritual life is impossible or meditation is impossible. You have to remember that when we try to meditate, we are actually trying to reverse the normal function of human mind. Mind is being dragged by all the 5 senses of perception towards different objects of enjoyment. Now we are trying to turn the mind inward, away from the senses of pleasure, sense pleasures, and objects of enjoyment. It's like swimming against the current, which naturally requires a lot of effort, deliberate exertion. So these thoughts will come. These negative thought currents will come. So when such negative thought currents and tendencies and impressions come to the surface, we must just watch them, not participating in the process, but as a spectator, we should be able to watch these impressions, these conflicting thought currents which come to the surface, which sometimes drag us away from the seat where we are sitting for meditation. And this is possible. To confront these thoughts, sitting there as a witness, not as a participant in the drama of negative thoughts, but just as a non-participating witness. To achieve this, we must try to reduce the sources of conflicting thoughts. And the sources of conflicting thoughts are external objects of enjoyment. So we must try to feed our mind more and more with thoughts and ideas which are helpful in spiritual life. Then such positive ideas, lives of great saints, spiritual personalities, any noble sublime idea becomes a healthy food for the human mind. On the one hand, that will reduce the emergence of conflicting thoughts. On the other hand, it can perhaps cause the emergence of positive thoughts. And slowly, as we practice this kind of witnessship, looking at these conflicting thoughts, approaching them as a witness, not as a participant, slowly conflicts will start decreasing. This is one method, it's implied. For that, the next qualification, that is, Dhamma means sense control. Sense control means diverting senses towards positive, useful thoughts. Senses normally flow towards negative ideas, objects of enjoyment. But deliberately we must try to keep the senses and mind busy with positive ideas and positive thoughts, like reading good books, discussing noble ideas, spiritual ideas, and trying to live mentally and intellectually in the world of spiritually stimulating ideas and thought currents. So, this is the second. The third qualification, the third characteristic that we must try to develop is a sense of quietude, remaining calm and quiet. So once we try to practice the first two, mind control and sense control, normally mind will become quiet and tranquil. Mind will withdraw itself from external objects. Because mind becomes attached only when we attach ourselves with the mind. When thoughts arise in mind, and when we look at these thoughts, not with any attachment, yes, that's nature of human mind to spring up negative thoughts, negative tendencies and impressions, because it's like moving against the current. When we move against the current of the river will try to take us in the opposite direction. So we must keep struggling. Once we realize this, then naturally mind gets less and less affected by negative thought currents and tendencies. That leads to quietude. That's a third qualification. Third in this means the third category. So I shall outline once more. The first qualification is a proper discerning, to develop a discerning mind. What is actually everlasting? What is eternal? What is non-eternal? Spiritual enlightenment is the only eternal, everlasting value, because that is the only thing which can give us lasting contentment. Everything else is relative, non-eternal. The second one is not being attached to worldly pleasures in this life or heavenly pleasures in the next. Heavenly pleasures are mentioned because sometimes we may not be interested in worldly pleasures, but we may think and do things expecting some gift from God, some future benefits, if not in this life, the next life. Even that desire will become a stumbling block in spiritual path. The third qualification, as I said, is sixfold. Mind control and then sense control. The third of these sixfold qualifications is quietude, that we already discussed. And the fourth one is also very important. It comes natural to all spiritual seekers. It's called tidiksha. Tidiksha actually means the ability to endure, to withstand negative and positive experiences in human life, pain and also pleasure. So, Sakaram sarvabhudanam apradigara purvakam chinta vilaparahidam sa tidiksha nigatyade. This is the definition. The translation is this. One should be able to endure mentally all types of experiences. If we become overjoyed, if we become jubilant, if we become overjoyed when we get something pleasant or something which gives us a sense of happiness, one should not become jubilant or overjoyed. That also will make us attached to that particular experience. And also one should not become depressed if something unhappy, if an unhappy incident takes place. So the same attitude, by perfect equanimity of mind towards happy and unhappy experiences, towards pain and also pleasure. This becomes natural for anyone who tries to set a priority in his life. Priority means what is everlasting, what is just relative, transitory. And then not bothering much about the transitory relative values, but then giving top priority, giving importance to what is everlasting. And we all know very well, any spiritual aspirant knows very well that spiritual enlightenment is the only thing that brings perfect contentment. As I said on many occasions, worldly enjoyments, worldly success may give us satisfaction, but then it is not everlasting. Any worldly achievement will vanish one day. Before we get that worldly achievement, we were unhappy because we didn't have it. When we get it, we are anxious not to lose it. So then also we are in a way not very happy. That also is a state of mental unhappiness. And we know very well that anything in the form of worldly happiness will certainly cease to be one day or other. But then there is something which is everlasting, a kind of inner beatitude, blissful experience. It's called inner contentment, satisfaction. Now, this is possible. This contentment, inner contentment, is possible only if we first realize that spiritual enlightenment, spiritual progress is the only everlasting value in human life. Once we are sure about this, then naturally we won't have much attraction for worldly pleasures. But then the question arises, what are the practical methods to achieve this? So mind should be kept under perfect control. We cannot control the mind deliberately, because the very nature of mind is restlessness. In the Gita that we are discussing, Arjuna asks a question, Chanchalam ki mana Krishna pramati belavadridham tasyaham nigraham manne vayuriva sudushkaram. Arjuna, the disciple of the Gita, presents his dilemma. He says, he tells his friend Krishna, his teacher, mind by its very nature is turbulent and restless. And any attempt to control the mind is like an attempt to control air, which you cannot control. It is as impossible to control the mind as controlling the air. Then Krishna says, Asamsayam Mahabahu Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kaunteya Vairagyena cha Grihyade. Krishna's answer is very classic. He says, you are perfectly right. And any attempt to control the mind is like an attempt to control the air. We cannot control it. So what can we do? Through constant practice, it is possible. That's Krishna's answer. Through constant practice. Abhyasa means constant practice. What are the practices? The practices we have already outlined, at least some of them. First, we must try to develop an interest, intense interest. See, once we develop an interest, then mind automatically follows. As I said, if a student says, I am not interested, I can't study, you ask him, then is there something which you do very well? I can play football well. Which means he is interested in football, he is not interested in studies. So if you want to make him study, you have to make him interested in study. So the focus of interest, the focus of concentration should be meditative life. That's one way to succeed in meditation. For that, we must first think and realize that spiritual enlightenment is the only solution for bringing peace of mind. Whatever profession we may be engaged in, whatever activities we may be engaged in. These are all necessary, but they do not bring everlasting peace. Rather, tension, stress, these are all invariable parts of activities in worldly life. It doesn't mean we should run away from worldly life. The idea is this. This experience should convince us that there is something other than worldly achievement, which is everlasting. That is spiritual enlightenment. That will naturally make us non-attached to anything other than spiritual values or any activity which will take us towards spiritual enlightenment. So meditation is an activity which naturally takes us to spiritual enlightenment. So we'll become really interested in meditation. That intensity of interest, intensification of interest will help us to become more and more concentrated in meditative practices. So, and then at the third level we found this will naturally help us to keep our mind under control. Naturally, if we are fully convinced that spiritual growth is the only answer to problems of life, then naturally we will try to read books related to spiritual life, discuss subjects related to spiritual life, and this way try to keep our mind fed with spiritually stimulating ideas. That will make our mind naturally, put our mind at control. Then sense control. So once we try to channelize our senses towards activities which are helpful in spiritual life, these senses naturally become more and more attuned to spiritual values. Then the fourth one of the third category is, I said, endurance. This will naturally give us enough strength of mind to face the problems that we normally have to encounter in spiritual life. As I said earlier, spiritual life is like swimming against the current. So naturally it creates a lot of obstacles. And then there is another fifth qualification which the great philosopher mentioned, Shankaracharya mentions. He calls it Shraddha. The English translation can be something like this: complete integrity, faith, dedication, application, sincerity. If we can put all this together, it will mean what is implied by the Sanskrit word Shraddha. So we must have a strong faith in what we are doing, self-confidence, a strong faith, a strong will. In spiritual life, just as in secular life, in worldly professions, a strong will is a primary prerequisite. A wavering mind can never get peace of mind. Wavering mind can never progress in spiritual life. So, a strong will and a strong mind, and dedication and application, these qualifications are essential for anyone to succeed in spiritual life. If we have all these, naturally, mind gets concentrated. And that is called samadhanam. That is the sixth qualification of the third category. The fourth qualification which Shankaracharya mentions is mumukshutvam. It means a strong desire for spiritual unfoldment, liberation. That's it. The translation is liberation. So first we must realize that this worldly life is not enough. It is not a perfect state of experience. This worldly life is not a perfect condition. It is not the ideal condition that we are seeking for. We want something higher and bigger than this. So that is related to a strong desire we already outlined earlier. So a strong desire, a strong inclination for spiritual unfoldment and liberation is the fourth fourth qualification which the great philosopher mentions there. This becomes natural for anyone who has already acquired the other three important qualifications. So first, we must have a sense of priority. What is really everlasting? What is really eternal? Everyone, even a non-believing, an atheist, if he is an educated and cultured man, can easily understand the worldly pleasures cannot and do not bring eternal peace and happiness. Any thinking man, any civilized, educated man or woman can easily understand that worldly pleasures can never bring eternal peace and happiness. Does it mean that there is nothing in this world which can give eternal peace and happiness? There is something. So this idea should come first. That there is something which is beyond worldly pleasures, which can bring eternal peace and happiness. That is the eternal value. That is spiritual unfoldment. That's the first one. Then a strong sense of non-attachment towards other non-spiritual transitory experiences. It doesn't mean that we must run away from them. It need not mean we should run away from them. Live in this world, have the best of this world, but keep in mind all that the world can and does offer is limited and transitory. That's all. So we can live in this world, but mentally we can be free from worldly enslavements. Then the third one is mind control, sense control, and a sense of perfect quietude, endurance, and faith in spiritual values, and an attempt to concentrate our mind on the spiritual goal. And the fourth one is a strong desire for spiritual unfoldment or liberation. Once we try to intellectually understand the relevance of these values, that will prepare the mind and that will program the mind, condition the mind for meditative life. So first we must try to create an intellectual climate, an emotional climate, emotional and intellectual condition within ourselves with these ideas. And then meditation becomes a natural process. I shall try to explain any of these topics that you may want to be clarified by me during the interaction session, or any subjects which are related to this. So we will have a brief period of meditation up to 8:30. Then we will have interaction from 8:30 to 9. If there is any topic for discussion.
One of the qualifications I've heard is also uparati.
Uparati means withdrawal. Withdrawal or quietude. Withdrawal of senses from the objects and keeping their own in respective sources. Vishayabhi parakritti sthapanam susubodagi. That is Shankaracharya's version. The idea is this, that it is something to do with the Vedantic concept of senses. When we see something, what really happens is our eyes and mind together go to the particular object and we see it. And then when we perceive it, our mind takes the form of that object that we see. So when we see an object, we don't think of anything, we don't see anything else, because the mind itself takes the form of that object. Now, uparati means let the senses remain in their respective indriyas. In Vedantic tradition, indriya or sense of perception is, in fact, it is located in this organ where the eyes are located. So, instead of going to objects, that the vision remains in their own respective receptacles. Well, example can be given. You may look at something. You may I can stare at this table or the chair, and my eyes are focused on that, apparently. But if my mind is elsewhere, then my eyes are not perceiving the chair. My eyes are remaining here. My eyes, the power of eyes to see, I should say, the power of the eyes to see the chair doesn't go out of the eyes and perceive the chair. The power of the eyes to perceive the chair becomes active when the eyes are combined with mind. So when you are looking at an object, and if you are seriously thinking of something else, it's entirely different. You won't be seeing it. You will be looking at, but you won't be seeing it. That applies to all other five senses also. This is called uparati. Let the eyes don't go to the objects. Let them remain in their receptacle. This is called withdrawal from an objective point of view, quietude from a subjective point of view. It leads to quietude because visual objects do not bring their images to the mind, so mind remains quiet. So in that sense, sometimes it is translated in English as quietude. But another translation is withdrawal, the meaning to see. That is the third. Fourth is titiksha, fifth is shraddha, sixth is samadhana. Any other discussion?
Yeah, you were talking about how the things in the material world and this empirical world cannot be or cannot grant everlasting happiness or fulfillment, which I get. And then you were also saying that when we realize the ultimate truth, that we will no longer be bound to the senses. Well, I was wondering what bridges that gap, or how do we get to that point? Is that
yes.
You could expand upon
How is this made possible?
Yes.
So, well, when we really get obsessed with external objects of pleasure or happiness, external objects, if you analyze, you realize behind this obsession, behind this extreme attachment to external objects, there is a feeling within us that it will bring eternal happiness. Intellectually or theoretically we may know, any thinking man will tell you that external things are transitory. If money, for example, it comes and goes. It's a fact. Any thinking man will know money is something which comes and goes. So money cannot bring eternal happiness. But when an individual goes out of his way, out of his greed to acquire money and becomes obsessed with that, there is within him the feeling that it is something eternal. On the one hand, he realizes that it is anything, any educated man will tell you that money cannot bring eternal happiness in this world. Everyone understands. But then the same individual will go out of his way to make money out of his greed, and that brings a lot of unhappiness, stress, tension. Or need not be money, maybe material success, whatever may be. When we go out of the way to acquire that, unconsciously we are dragged by the feeling that it is something eternal. Otherwise, one can never go out of this way. So Vedanta tells us to remind ourselves of the transitoriness of these empirical, earthly, worldly pleasures. It is not the absence of knowledge that's the problem. There are millions of people who read Vedantic books and they are fully convinced intellectually that there is only one way to attain eternal happiness and tranquility. Everyone knows. But they also suffer.
Yeah.
Those who are reading these books day and night, those who teach in universities, for example, Vedantic texts, they are not better than those who teach business management or banking or anything like that. See, there is no difference. So intellectual conviction or theoretical understanding doesn't help. So, as you said, there is a gap. On the one hand, theoretically and intellectually we know it. But still, in action, at the time of doing, going out of the way to make money, we forget it. This is called in Vedantic terminology, called Maya. Maya is something that we cannot explain. Certain things we do, certain things do happen around us in this world. We can never explain it, but it is there for all of us to see. We are experiencing it every moment of our life. We cannot explain it. In Vedantic terminology, this Shankaracharya says, this we can never explain, but we experience it. And when we come out of it, we understand it is actually non-existent. So all the scriptures are trying to remind us, they teach us to remember this when we live in this world. That's the purpose of the scriptures. So how do we gap the bridge? Keeping our mind engaged in such thoughts and ideas, reminding our mind. Reading once won't do, listening once won't do, because there are millions of people are listening to these things every day in many places. Altogether we find at least tens of thousands. But still, they don't always become spiritual seekers. So there is a bridge, there is a gap to be bridged between theoretical understanding and its direct application in daily life. When you apply it, it brings you peace of mind. So the only way at the beginning is to narrow this gap by constantly reminding ourselves of this. That's what Vedanta. I hope it's clear to you.
Yeah, I get it. So
go on remembering, reading this book, listening to these ideas, discussing these ideas. It doesn't mean that you should withdraw yourself from your daily activities. Not at all. Be engaged in your activities. Try to do it to the best of your ability. At the same time, just keep this in mind.
Mm-hmm. With the application
yes.
of the...
Swami Vivekananda's guru, teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, tells us that keep this idea in mind. Of course, he uses a different language, Keep this idea somewhere and then live in this world. That's the idea. But when we live in this world, we should remember we have kept this idea, we have got this idea. We should not forget that we have kept it in our pockets. In Sri Ramakrishna's language, putting in modern way, keep this idea in our pocket and work in the world.
So the more you apply it experientially, the more comes out of the theory and intellectual understanding and more into your experiential knowledge. As
we keep remembering this, we find it gives answers to many of our problems of life. As I said, problems are problems only when we don't know how to resolve them, or when we think that life can be devoid of any problems. There can be no life without problems. So once we realize this, problems are not problems. So if we can equip our own mind with these ideas, then we become strong enough to face the problems. That's what Vedanta says.
So you say, Swami, we must not only be intellectually aware of this idea in a little corner of our mind, but we really must sort of saturate our mind with these ideas. I mean, constantly expose, review them, remind ourselves that they are real. And
through meditation, contemplation, and so on. Introspection and so on.
So, but it's an intellectual process at first, simply reminding oneself that this is the reality, and constantly, like a phone number, you're repeating it again and again so you won't forget it.
Yes. Vedanta uses the words two terms, Sravanam and Mananam. Sravanam, literally it means hearing, but its real meaning is with perfect concentration we must become familiar with this idea, either by listening to some exposition or by reading or by any other means. We must become intellectually familiar with this idea, and then we must contemplate on the meaning of this idea. We takes the idea deeper into our mind, and then meditating on this idea. In fact, we all become what we meditate upon. We all become what we deeply contemplate on. Really, this is what really happens. We are the end results of what we really think upon. Because unconsciously we direct our energies and actions towards the actualization of what we are trying to visualize, conceptualize. So that's why the great philosopher Shankaracharya says, once we decide that spiritual unfoldment is the only answer to our problems, then all other actions will follow.
Maharaj, can you say something about the process of meditation itself, apart from the scriptural implications?
Yes. The meditation can be defined as focusing the mind on an object. According to scriptures, meditation means focusing our mind upon an object completely. Technically speaking, for 12 seconds, that's what it says. 12 into 12, 144 seconds. That means dharana is 12, dhyana is 144. Now, this is possible only when we completely remove all other thought currents from our mind. When you concentrate, meditate upon some one supreme ideal or one great supreme principle, all other thought currents should be completely removed from the mind. From a non-theistic point of view, meditation means sitting quietly and trying to empty your mind of all ideas, thought currents and tendencies. This is possible by trying to avoid identifying with the thought currents. Thoughts and tendencies and thought currents will emerge. Instead of trying to identify with those thought currents, we must try to watch those thought currents in a very objective, detached manner, as a witness. Then mind will become calm and quiet. Because whenever there are thought currents, mind will become restless. So trying to empty the mind of all tendencies from a non-theistic point of view. From a theistic point of view, focusing the mind completely on the form of your object of meditation. It may be supreme idea, it may be a meaning of a mantra, it may be the form of a deity, whatever may be.
The form without any content, in other words, you focus on the form. What about the significance of the form?
Well, if you're talking about the personal aspect of a God, see, incarnations we call, then generally devotional philosophers advise spiritual seekers to focus on the deity and to concentrate on the different attributes of the deity or different characteristics of the deity. It could be, of course, in Hindu theistic tradition it is very simple. God is omniscient, omnipotent, God is merciful, God is the repository of all great human characteristics, like compassion, friendliness, mercifulness that you can think of. This is one way to conceptualize a theistic object of meditation. If you are concentrating on Om, because that is one popular way of meditation, the Upanishad tradition. Om, you may have seen, many of you, most of you familiar. Om is simple. Ak, A, U, Ma. These are the three letters which combined together are called Om. In a way, it stands for the totality of human experience. All that you can think of. Experience in waking state, when we are waking, when you are fully awake, when we are engaged in different activities in day-to-day life, or experiences related to dream, which are somehow related to waking experience, or the feeling of blissfulness, complete relaxation that you feel in deep sleep state. It's called Sushupti state. So these three states explain the totality of human experience and human knowledge. We can never have any knowledge or any experience which except in the waking, dream and deep sleep states. Now Omkara it consists of all the three stages. And again, Omkara also includes the phenomenal and also the noumenal levels of human experience and human knowledge. Experience related to this world and experience related to the transcendental reality. That also is included in Omkara. And Omkara also includes human experiences related to the three dimensions of time, 3 points of time, the past, present and future. So we can never have any experience except in the past, present and future, or the waking, deep sleep and dream states, or the phenomenal or the noumenal states. So Omkara, in a way, it consists of the totality of human knowledge and human experience. If you meditate upon it, then you are meditating on perfection, completeness, what is called Purnata in Sanskrit, called Purnata, which cannot have any symbol, but if at all there can be a symbol, that symbol can be a most impersonal symbol. That is, Omkara is the most impersonal symbol. That's one way of meditation. So as we meditate more and more, spiritually we evolve. See, one difficult problem when we talk about meditation is, beyond a limit, we can never explain unless we do practice it. That is, it is not an experimental science, it's purely experiential. Unless we practice, we can never fully understand. As we practice, we feel inner quietude on the one hand, and a feeling of unity of existence on the other. At the subjective level, we feel quietude, serenity, peacefulness, and so on. At the objective level, we become tolerant, broad-minded, universal in our outlook, and we become very Catholic in our outlook and approach to things. Man or woman, a spiritual seeker, transcends his normal human limitations and goes beyond that. This is the first and visible sign of progress in meditative life. But this can never be achieved fully without a corresponding philosophy of life. This is a very important point. See, we may try to empty the mind without a philosophy of life. What we are, this question we must try to answer. What's the meaning of life? What should be our approach towards the external world? See, these are some of the questions. So unless we combine meditative practice with this solid philosophy of life, the result can never be long-lasting. Pranayama or emptying the mind as a relaxation technique may be effective if you practice every day, morning and evening a little. It can bring down, as I said earlier, it can bring down stress level. It can bring down tension. But when a real problem arises, then this may not work. Under normal circumstances, just as physical exercise helps you to maintain your health, so this also may help you to bring down stress level and tension level. But when a real crisis comes, as I said earlier, the death of a dear person, somebody discussed this point some time back in one of our classes. Somebody dies. How do we confront this problem? A near and dear one dies. How do we confront this problem? That if you go and practice breath control, you may not be able to do that. So then we must understand what is life. So life is not something which comes to an end in this life. Death is not end of the road. Death is not end of the journey. Death is only a point of transition. It is not the end of everything. So in Vedantic tradition, there is no hell and there is no hellfire. There is no eternal damnation. You are free to build your own future by orienting our activities, deeds and thoughts towards the highest spiritual ideal. In a way, Vedanta tells us that we are the makers of our own destiny. On the one hand, it is the path to freedom, eternal freedom. On the other hand, it gives us freedom to improve our own lot, to improve our future, to build our own future. Because it is related to the law of karma and the law of rebirth. Both are interrelated. We are the result of what we did yesterday. So we can build our own tomorrow, our future, by improving our actions, not only physical actions, but thoughts, by improving our thoughts, improving our words, improving our day-to-day activities, we can build our own future. So on the one hand, it is the pathway to eternal freedom. On the other hand, it gives complete freedom to us to build our own future.
Beyond the waking, dream and deep sleep, do they also talk of Turiya?
Turiya, I was just talking about Omkara, Turiya is called Amatra. Where Omkara begins, where it terminates, that is Turiya. The Akar, as I said, Omkara consists of 3 letters. It's related to Sanskrit language. In Sanskrit, according to Sanskrit language, grammatical rules, Omkara includes these 3, A, U and Ma. A corresponds to our experiences in waking state, U corresponds to our experiences in dream state, and Ma corresponds to our experiences in deep sleep state. Now, when you utter this word Omkara, somewhere it ceases. It ends in silence, where there is no sound that is audible. That is symbolic of Turiya, because Turiya cannot be symbolized.
Yeah, but do they not say that Turiya is the witness of all the 3 states?
Yes, Turiya is the essence of all the 3 states. At the same time, it is different from all the 3 states. I am describing the point. Turiya means the highest spiritual experience, Atman. Turiya is present in all the 3 states, but it is different from all the 3 states in the sense that it is not confined to all the 3 states. With Turiya is the the seer, the experiencer in all the 3 states, but it is not conditioned or limited by the experiences. In that sense, it is the unlimited. With Turiya is the present, is the essence of all the 3 states, but it is different because all the 3 states are conditioned by the experiences of the 3 states. The experiencer is conditioned by the experiences in all the 3 states. But Turiya is beyond this limitation.
Do the saints and sages, they live in the Turiya state? Do not the saints and sages, they live in the Turiya state?
Yes, in Samadhi state, they are in a state of perfect identity with the Turiya state. In Samadhi state. Turiya is the term used in Mandukya Upanishad tradition. And in fact, that same idea, Turiya, as implied in Mandukya Upanishad, is called Atman or Brahman in other Upanishads. What other Upanishads call Atman or Brahman is called Turiya in the Mandukya Upanishad. That's all. Turiya is the state of experience. When you experience the trans-empirical, the transcendental reality, that experience level is called Turiya. And it is beyond Omkara, beyond the empirical, where you cannot call it anything. It is pure experience. I think we have reached the end of if there is any other topic for discussion, I can, otherwise we'll conclude.
One Maharaj, could you just say something about the concept of help in all of this, or the concept of God as a factor in all of this?
Yes. In fact, a strong belief in a personal God who is the embodiment of all conceivable human attributes and human virtues like mercy, compassion, and so on. It's a great help in meditative life, spiritual life. It is, but you have to remember, the Vedantic concept of God is ultimately not an extraterrestrial concept of God. Vedantic concept of God is different from a God who creates this world and stays apart from this world. In Vedantic tradition, God is not only the efficient cause of the world, God is also the material cause of the world. Because it is God's spirit, it is God's presence that is present in everything, in the creation which He Himself creates. And not going to the Advaitic level, because there the subject is dealt with at a different level, but at the monotheistic level, the Advaitic, Vishishtadvaitic tradition, even, the monotheistic tradition, God is present as an indweller in everything in this world. So if one can believe in such a God as present in himself or herself at the time of meditation, then meditative practice becomes very easy. It becomes but I was advised not to focus on the theistic aspect of meditation. I was approaching it from a very broad angle. But those who believe in God will find meditation a much more easier way, easier path to acquire perfection.
I would just like to affirm what you just said, because I do believe in God, and it has made my practice much easier.
Yes.
And I feel that that helps with the mind control.
Exactly.
Because when I'm out in the world, I see all that God
Exactly.
has created.
Yes.
And
True.
God's presence is
Yes.
everywhere for me.
In fact, the Gita itself says
Yes.
a genuine believer in God will find, at the time of meditation, he will find he or she is living in God, and God is living in her or him. See, Mayeva mana adarsva mai buddhim nivesya nivasi shisi mayeva ata udhamna samsya. If you want the Gita 12th chapter, 8th verse, if you take, you find where Sri Krishna says, at the highest experience level, a meditator or a devotee will realize that mentally he or she is living in God, and also God is living in him or her. The Krishna uses only one term: you shall live in me. That is because it's a metrical form, it's a verse, But the commentators say, they expand the meaning. They say here Lord Krishna means that at the highest devotion level, a devotee would feel that God is living in her or in him, and he or she is living in God, because mind and intellect both are dedicated, surrendered to God. That's the idea.
There is that oneness.
Yes, the oneness at the highest level, even in devotional life for a theist, you feel the highest level is Sayujya. Sayujya is technically not very different from the Advaitic experience of Jiva Brahma Aikyam, what we call the identity of the individual soul and supreme soul. Sayujya is the highest reach of devotional life for a devotee of God. But I have to address in a broad-minded way.
I understand. Thank you.
Yes. So we'll continue the discussion in the next class. Thank you. Om peace, peace, peace. Om shanti, shanti, shanti. Hari Om. That's it. Sri Ramakrishna Order.
So the next class we expect will be back down at the men's retreat house. We had to come up here because we've had a group of people are at the men's retreat house, and so we had to move up here. Next class should be down there again.